The Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, know that they have been rumbled. That is the only explanation behind their truly deranged statement, suggesting that Tom Bower, one of Britain's most respected authors, someone who had a long career of revealing the truth about high-profile figures from Mohammed Al-Fayed to Simon Cowell for years before he tackled Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, is somehow a conspiracy theorist for deciding to tell the truth about them. And my God, there are truth bombs in this new book, Betrayal, the follow-up to Revenge, which backs up much of what I have been reporting about not only the strains in Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's relationship.
They were supposed to stay quiet, just stay quiet, and everything might have faded away, but they didn't. Instead, they exploded. And in doing so, they may have just exposed far more than they ever intended. Because here's the real question that's been echoing louder than any headline. Why did they react so fast, so emotionally before the book was even out? Within hours of those early excerpts surfacing, a furious statement hit the internet, branding Tom Bower as deranged. Not mistaken, not inaccurate, not legally wrong. No, deranged, a word dripping with intent, a word chosen like a signal flare in the dark. And suddenly, everything changed, because the moment that statement dropped, something strange happened. The very thing they were trying to shut down exploded. The book didn't disappear, it shot straight to #1. People who hadn't even heard of it were now searching, clicking, pre-ordering. Not because of the book itself, but because of the panic surrounding it. And panic is never random. It makes you wonder, what exactly were they so afraid of? Because this isn't just another royal story. This isn't about palace whispers or minor disputes. No, this cuts deeper. This reaches back, before the titles, before the interviews, before the carefully crafted image. Back to a past that, for years, seemed tightly controlled, almost too controlled. And then comes the most uncomfortable question of all, the one nobody can seem to shake. If it's all lies, why not sue? Think about it. Lawsuits have never been off the table before. In fact, they've been used repeatedly. Journalists, tabloids, media outlets, if something crossed the line, action followed. Fast, public, aggressive. But here, silence. Not legal silence, strategic silence. No courtroom, no case, no attempt to shut it down through the one method that would actually prove it wrong. And that absence speaks louder than anything else. Because Tom Bower isn't just another writer throwing opinions into the void. He's a barrister, a man who builds cases, not rumors. Over decades, he has written about powerful figures, politicians, billionaires, global elites, and yet somehow none of them have successfully taken him down. Not one. Which raises a chilling possibility. Maybe the danger isn't what he's saying, but how much of it can be proven. And then things take an even darker turn. Because this wasn't just about a statement. It became something else. A signal. A trigger. The language used wasn't random. It echoed something already familiar within certain online circles. Words that ignite reactions. Words that mobilize. And almost instantly the response followed. Online spaces lit up. Aggressive voices surged forward. A 79-year-old journalist suddenly found himself surrounded, not in a courtroom, but in the chaotic arena of public opinion, where facts blur and narratives spiral out of control. But here's the twist no one expected. That attack may have backfired, because in trying to discredit him, they may have accidentally validated him. Cameras appeared. Footage surfaced. Presence confirmed. The very people trying to undermine him placed him exactly where he needed to be. An eyewitness, standing inside the world he was documenting. And suddenly, the story wasn't just about what he wrote, but about why they reacted. Because reactions reveal patterns. And patterns tell stories. Stories of tension behind closed doors. Stories of relationships shifting, fracturing, disappearing entirely. Stories of conversations that escalated beyond repair. Moments where voices were raised, fingers pointed, lines crossed. Moments where something subtle but irreversible changed. And then there's the isolation. Phone numbers changed. Long-time friends cut off. Entire circles erased almost overnight. People who once stood close suddenly gone without explanation, without closure. Not drifting apart, but removed. And the question lingers, was it choice or influence? Because the deeper you go, the more unsettling it becomes. There are claims, allegations that go far beyond personality clashes or royal disagreements. Claims about identity, about reputation, about how public perception can shift so dramatically that it collapses entirely. At one point, there was talk of a brand audit, a cold, calculated evaluation of value. Not emotional, not personal, just numbers. And the result? Devastating. A fall from admired to liability, from asset to risk. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being handed proof, evidence that everything you believed about your influence wasn't real. And how do you respond to something like that? Denial, deflection, comparison? Because comparisons were made to figures who had faced their own public battles, as if aligning with them might somehow restore the narrative. But narratives don't fix themselves. They unravel, especially when public perception starts shifting in real time. Appearances that once drew admiration now spark skepticism. Moves that once felt authentic now feel calculated. Even moments meant to show compassion begin to look performative. And when that happens, the audience changes. They stop watching with admiration. They start watching with questions. And questions are dangerous because once they begin, they don't stop. They grow, they multiply, they dig, and suddenly everything becomes part of a bigger picture. A puzzle where every missing piece feels intentional. Even silence becomes suspicious, especially silence, because the simplest answers are the ones never given. And that's where things stand now. A book that hasn't even fully landed yet is already shaking foundations. Reactions that came too fast, too strong, too early, raising more doubts than they resolved. A narrative that was once controlled, now slipping into the hands of those asking harder questions. And perhaps the most unsettling part? This might only be the beginning, because if this is how things are unfolding before the full story is even out, what happens when the rest is finally revealed? What else is waiting just beneath the surface? And just when it feels like the story couldn't possibly get more intense, it shifts again. Because what's coming next isn't just about reactions or statements, it's about what happens when the past, the present, and the carefully protected image all begin to collide at the exact same time. Because behind all the noise, behind the outrage, behind the headline screaming controversy, there's something far more unsettling quietly building in the background. A pattern. And once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. Because this isn't just about one book. This isn't just about one journalist. This is about a timeline, a series of moments, decisions, and turning points that suddenly begin to connect in ways they never did before. Take a step back, look at the trajectory. At one point, everything was at its peak. Crowds, adoration, global attention, a level of influence that most people could never even imagine touching. Every move watched, every appearance celebrated, every word amplified across continents. And then something shifted. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, quietly, almost invisibly at first. The tone changed, the reactions changed, the perception changed. And now, years later, what once looked like unstoppable momentum is being questioned in ways that feel almost unrecognizable compared to where it all began. And that's where this story takes its most uncomfortable turn. Because while the world is focused on the book, something else is approaching. A return. Australia, 7 years later. But this time, it's not the same. Because the last time they stepped onto that soil, it was a moment of absolute triumph. Newly married, radiating attention, announcing a pregnancy that captured headlines everywhere. The crowds weren't just large, they were overwhelming. A tidal wave of support, of excitement, of belief. That was the peak. But what happens when you return after everything that's happened since? Because now, before they've even arrived, something is already waiting. A petition, not a quiet one, not a fringe opinion. A public demand, clear, direct, and impossible to ignore, calling for zero taxpayer support. Not a dollar, not a cent. A message that cuts straight to the core. You chose to step away, now live with it. And suddenly, the tone of the return feels very different. Because this isn't a royal tour. It's something else entirely. Private appearances, ticketed events, prices that feel almost surreal when you remember how it all started. Thousands of dollars for access, for proximity, for a moment that once belonged freely to the public. And that contrast, it stings because people remember. They remember when they showed up out of respect, out of admiration, out of genuine connection. And now those same people are being asked to pay to stand in the same space, to capture the same glimpse, to experience what once felt natural. And the question starts forming again, louder this time. What changed? Because it's not just the public that's different. The environment has changed too. The media waiting this time isn't the same media that welcomed them before. every journalist, every interviewer, every camera, they're not arriving with curiosity alone. They're arriving with context, with details, with pages of information fresh in their minds from a book that by then will have fully landed. There will be no blank slate, no clean narrative. Every question will carry weight. Every answer will be measured. Every hesitation noticed. And suddenly, the margin for control becomes razor thin, because control has always been the key. Control of the story, control of the image, control of what is seen and what is never allowed to surface. But what happens when that control starts slipping? Because that's what this feels like. Not a collapse, not yet, but a crack, a fracture running through something that once seemed perfectly sealed. And fractures spread. They don't stay contained. They grow with pressure. And right now, the pressure is everywhere. It's in the financial questions, whispers about revenue streams tightening, about deals not delivering the way they were expected to, about projects that didn't land with the impact they were supposed to have. It's in the public perception, moments that once would have been celebrated now being picked apart, analyzed, debated, and sometimes outright rejected. It's in the contradictions, statements that don't quite align, narratives that shift depending on the moment, details that raise more questions the deeper you look, and it's in the silence, always the silence, because there are questions that have lingered for years now, questions that should have simple answers, clear answers, direct answers, but those answers never come, not fully, not clearly, not in a way that closes the conversation. And so the conversation continues, relentlessly, because once doubt enters a narrative, it doesn't leave easily. It sits there, waiting, growing, until eventually it becomes louder than the story itself. And that's the position now. A story that was once tightly controlled is now being shaped by something else, by reactions, by contradictions, by the very attempts to suppress it. That control may already be slipping. And if it is, then this story isn't ending anytime soon. It's only just getting started.